Are there really people who's genetically fatter? I used to work at a lab that sells lab mice worldwide. One big seller is a mouse model for diabetes. That does not mean the mice necessarily have diabetes. They are simply a model. But these mice spontaneously cropped up in a typical Black 6 model. Same food availability and type. At first anyway. Same circumstances. They were just breeding regular old mice and ended up getting a few every so often that are just fat. Like, very fat. They look like little black hockey pucks. They found out there is a gene where if a mouse had it, 25% of the offspring turn out to be these hockey puck fat mice. The fat mice don't breed well for a few reasons, but you have like a 50% chance of getting a carrier mouse who can pass the gene on to their litters. Interestingly, they used to think the carrier mice were indistinguishable from typical nice. But that found that as they age, they too get a bit chonky. Not as big as the hockey pucks, but still. Also, genes like to shake things up occasionally. So you have this gene and it decides to go recombinant. Well, good luck. All the old rules might go out the window. And this is only on one model. There are thousands of mouse models. IMHO. Genetics are freaking weird and we don't entirely understand them or the mechanisms that govern how and when genes change. Some people are likely born to be heavier. The same way it can drop up in mice. Or to not get nutrients from their food as well, which could make them always feel like they need to eat just to satisfy their basic needs. It's a complicated question, because anyone who cannot find food will become skinny. You don't walk into a village of starving people and find one fat guy who's just genetically fat. What differs from one person's genetics to another's is how fat the body will become if you don't pay attention to your weight, and how much attention to your weight you need to pay. There are some people who can just live their lives without ever thinking about their weight, and still maintain a healthy weight. And there are some people who, in order not to be fat, would have to essentially devote half their waking hours to weight maintenance. And most of them reason that that simply isn't worth it. They weren't born just to spend nearly their whole lives dieting and being hungry. Yes, some people are genetically predisposed to retaining more fat. That said, there's very few people who wouldn't lose weight and size in a true caloric deficit with proper macros. We were lied to about the food pyramid, and the food plate is no better. I know a family that I think fits this description. All of them very tall and wide. Not all of their wideness is from fat, but some of it is. These are the people that make me believe people can have big bones. In pictures of me with their daughter, even her skull is almost twice as large as mine, and it looks like we're doing LOTR style perception changes when we're not. Well, we're all different. Yes. If we each control our diet, carefully watch our intake, and follow an exercise program, then we can, nearly, all maintain a healthy weight. But, for some of us, that can be a whole lot different than others. We all absorb calories differently. Those calorie counts on labels are just estimates to begin with, and we each break things down and absorb them a little differently. 2. I'm not saying some people only get 50 calories from eating a whole pizza, nor do others get 2,000 calories from an apple, but a 3% 4% difference from each serving might not be unrealistic. Same for burning calories. Different people burn different amounts of calories for the same body weight, same exercise, same length of time, they burn different amounts. So physically it can be different. Bring in all the other influences and mentally we can have a very different task as well. Some people are addicted to the good feelings of food. Some of us were trained to finish everything, whether hungry or not. Some of us were taught that we were supposed to ask for seconds as a sign of appreciation for the cook. Some of us hide behind food and lots of other terrible ways we treat food. Like anything else in life, most of us can probably change. But for some of us it's difficult. And it takes time. It takes motivation. And it takes significant effort. If you're already overwhelmed with life, work, school, kids, bills, family and other demands, and you already are stretched thin, then would you really be motivated to put yourself through the hours of work for this? You are the one who will need to change it all. Grocery shopping, food prep, dealing with the complaining of the kids, spouse, making time for exercise, facing constant temptation, feeling tired, inevitably slipping up, and all for what? To lose a pound or two a week, and have to spend more money on new clothing? Medical issues may or may not happen. They don't have to. Personally, I grew up in a family of large folks. None of them had any of the classic fat diseases. Unless someone sees these things, they really aren't a great motivator. We humans aren't great at risk assessment. We see that all the time with cigarette, alcohol, and other drug use. In a basic way, you are correct. It really is calories in, calories out. But life never really is that basic. The number of those calories varies. The motivation to change varies. The reasons why people get fat in the first place varies. The time and resources that they have available varies. It's emotional. It's mental. It's physical. It's hormonal. It's dependent on the organisms living in our gut. It's probably got more, too. Humans are complex organisms. Yes and no. People who are just fatter do have metabolic disorders. A big one is PCOS. It comes down to metabolism, diet, and exercise. For people with a slower metabolism, they will need a very dramatic diet with moderate exercise to lose weight. People with a high metabolism can eat garbage and lightly exercise, walk a few thousand steps daily, and stay fit. I do not know if metabolism is genetic, as it can change, but it is pretty difficult to rewrite your metabolism. Usually an extreme change in diet or exercise will slow or hasten your metabolism. Yes, if everyone ate the exact same and worked out the exact same, we'd all still be different sizes. Things like PCOS, thyroid issues, insulin resistance, diabetes, even lack of diverse gut bacteria is linked to obesity. I saw this documentary the other day. You know those feces transplants? They save lives. But when the feces came from an obese person, the person whom got the transplant couldn't stop gaining weight until they too were obese. And they've seen the opposite too, I think. Also, eating disorders impacts weight too. The main cause of binge eating, which makes you gain weight, is actually over-restricting. It's people whom tried to lose weight all their lives and gone on all diets, whom feel guilt around food. They're the ones trying so badly to lose it, that create that eating disorder. Also, comfort eating as a coping mechanism. You know how people use drugs and alcohol to feel better for a moment. Food releases feel-good hormones that reduces pain for a moment. And food is an addiction hard to beat. You need it to survive. You basically need to microdose on your drug. Usually addicts whom quit drugs or alcohol switch to eating disorders. It's linked. There is a reason behind it they didn't choose. A need to seek a coping mechanism of the pain you're in. And you do what you gotta do to survive. Society is extremely fat-phobic. Fat people are told they don't deserve love. They are shamed in movies. Everywhere they go, it's inaccessible, like you can't shop clothes in IRL stores or go to amusement parks. Doctors dismiss your health issues. Plus that your physical health can be impacted negatively. No one would choose to be fat in this world. Therefore people do not choose it. It isn't their fault. It isn't laziness. It's mental or physical illness where weight gain is a side effect. I don't grasp how people don't understand that. So many plus-size people post telling you about all this. A quick search and you find all this information. Perhaps it's time to listen. Mostly no. Like you said, certain medical conditions can increase the likelihood of obesity. Where our body decides to prioritize the storage of fat is genetic. Some people may have more fat in parts where it's hard for them to not look fat. Otherwise, weight is managed by calories in versus calories burnt. Each of those are managed by human decisions of exercise and how much to eat. Wasn't going to comment, but the other responses are overcomplicating everything. Genetics influences everything about us, including how our body reacts to food and exercise. With that being said, aside from certain rare diseases, no, people aren't just genetically morbidly obese, or even overweight. Diet and exercise. The role of metabolism in weight is incredibly, hilariously overstated. People who are overweight actually have higher BMRs, not lower. Yes, there is obviously a difference in the baseline caloric needs from person to person. But in totality it's incredibly minimal once factors such as height, FMI and sex are factored in. People gain extremely similar amounts of fat based on the number of calories above their total daily energy expenditure that they consume. The idea that there are some people who can eat cake all day and never gain a pound has been debunked time and time again. I am 66F and come from a skinny family. I am fat and have been all my life. I got blamed for it too. Now I did DNA test for family tree and met someone who had a photo of my great-grandmother. We are twins. She was fat too. She farmed, raised food for 15 kids, caned at no store in 75 miles. Worked sun up to sundown. She was fat. Now my skinny family have diabetes and high blood pressure, heart failure and so on. I got the diabetes thing, but mine stays under control, theirs don't. I have a slower heartbeat and lower blood pressure than most 20-somethings. DNA is odd. No. With an asterisk. Fat is stored energy. And energy cannot be created from nothing. Fat can only be created when you absorb more energy than you expend. There is another interesting part at play in that a calorie consumes, eaten, is not always absorbed. It is possible that two people who eat the exact same food absorb differing amounts of calories. What is always true though is that the amount of calories absorbed will result in identical fat gain if all other factors like previous consumption or energy expenditure is also identical. Having said that, there are genetic disorders that increase your hunger, which causes you to eat more than you need and therefore gain fat. I'm not a doctor, geneticist, nutritionist or anything else like that, but here's what I find pretty easy to believe probably does vary with genetics. Metabolism rate at which your body consumes food and uses the energy from it, and processes waste. How efficiently the body builds muscle fiber, and how readily it stores fat. How easily, how much the intestines actually absorb food that you eat into the bloodstream, including how much fat and sugars and so on get passed through. How fast your liver and kidneys and so on actually work. The actual structure of your skeleton, frame, torso and how wide and tall it is. Probably a bunch of other biological, chemical stuff. That's not to say that one person will be genetically fatter than another. It's just to point out that it's conceivable that there must be some variation in how people's bodies process and consume food, gain and or lose muscle and fat, and the shape of their frame and so on. And all of that obviously contributes to the issue of how easy it is to lose weight. I see every reason to doubt that it's exactly the same difficulty for everyone. Yes, there are certain mutations. For example, some in melanocortin receptors that regulate both pigmentation and appetite, energy, Expenditure regulations in brain. With those mutations, signals that regulate satiety and BMR are impacted. There are some cool publications about red-haired fat children with some of those mutations. https://pubmed.ncb nlm.nih.gov/355953550/. Some people who were malnourished at birth will also gain more weight from eating the same amount of food as someone who had enough food growing up. Your body is used to not having enough calories available, so it will save up, so to speak, when there's extra calories. If someone is fat, barring an extremely small percentage of people, it's because they consume more calories than they burn. People almost always hugely underestimate how much they eat, and lie to themselves and others about it. In a word, yes. I have tracked my calorie intake for over a decade. I started a certain medication roughly 4 years ago, which doesn't have weight gain as a side effect. Since starting that medication, I have gained roughly 40 pounds. I have not changed my eating habits, and the amount I exercise has increased. I have also tried lowering my calorie intake to 1,000 per day, and while that stalled the weight gain, it wasn't worth maintaining because I was literally making myself miserable. Now, this is not a genetic thing, but an example of a case where losing weight is more complicated than it appears on the surface. I do need to be on the medication, so losing weight has seemed basically impossible. My doctor is trying a new medication for me now, but there is no guarantee things will change. I am lucky to not be overweight to the point of disability, but I'm still technically overweight as I am now. All of that aside, there are many reasons people can see their weight as something unchangeable. They could be in a situation like mine, or it could be more a matter of time and energy. It costs both to eat better and get a good amount of exercise. Some PPL retain fat genetically better, but if you eat less than your calories burned, you lose weight. You just eat too much.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.